Michael Anthony is top 5 rock and roll bass player in the world. Any bass player will tell you that, any musician will tell you that. Listen to him play on the circle. He ain't going boom, 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 unless it was called for.
Michael Anthony finally reveals the untold story about his time with the band and his complicated relationship with Eddie Van Halen. Decades of silence are lifted as he shares memories that fans have never heard before. Join us as we dive into the moments, the music, and the revelations that changed everything. From zero to fame, Michael Anthony's story begins far from the bright stages and loud crowds he would one day stand in front of. He was born in Chicago, but his family moved to California when he was still a child. The move opened new doors for him. California was full of young musicians, small bands, and people who spent their free time trying to make music. Michael grew up in a normal home, but music was always present. His father played trumpet, and that sound filled the house often. Because of this, Michael learned rhythm early, long before he picked up a bass. At first, he followed his father's path and learned to play the trumpet. It taught him discipline, breath control, timing, and how to listen closely to other players. Even though he didn't stay with the trumpet, those lessons stayed with him for life. When he became a bassist, that sense of timing and attention helped him stand out. He understood how to support a band, how to blend with the drums, and how to add strength without overpowering the others. Those skills became important later when Van Halen formed. As a teenager, Michael explored different instruments. He listened to rock bands and felt drawn to the bass. He liked the steady sound and the responsibility it carried. It was not a flashy instrument, but it was essential. He practiced for hours, learning how to create clean lines and how to lock in with a drummer. His natural voice also developed during this time. He had a high, strong tone that could cut through loud music, which later became one of Van Halen's signature sounds. When he entered high school, he started playing in local bands. One of his early groups was called Snake. They played small gigs, school events, and parties. These shows were simple, but they gave him confidence. He learned how to perform in front of people, how to handle equipment, and how to stay calm when something went wrong. He also learned how important teamwork was. A band only worked when everyone respected each other, and he carried that belief for the rest of his career. The California music scene introduced him to many young players who were trying to find their sound. Among them were two brothers, Eddie and Alex Van Halen, who were playing in their own band, Mammoth. Michael first crossed paths with them at a high school event where both bands performed. Mammoth had equipment problems that night, and Michael helped by lending them his PA system. It was a small act of kindness, but Eddie and Alex remembered it. Later, when their bassist left, they invited Michael to audition. The moment they played together, something clicked. Their styles fit naturally. Eddie's guitar, Alex's drums, and Michael's bass created a powerful and balanced sound. His voice added a new layer that lifted the band even higher. The connection was strong enough that he became a permanent member, and the foundation of Van Halen was set. Everything that came later, fame, conflict, success, and heartbreak, built on these early years that shaped him into the player who held the band steady when things got rough. Let's keep going, because the early days of Van Halen get even more intense from here. The night that changed everything. The story of how Michael Anthony officially became part of Van Halen starts with one simple moment at a local high school event. At the time, Michael was playing in his band. Snake and Eddie and Alex Van Halen were playing in their band, Mammoth. None of them was famous. They were just young musicians trying to get gigs, build a following, and make enough noise to get noticed in the busy California music scene. These school shows were small and often chaotic, but they were important to local bands who wanted any chance to perform. On the night their paths crossed, Mammoth ran into a serious problem. Their PA system, which they needed for vocals, suddenly stopped working. Without it, they could not perform. Eddie and Alex tried to fix it, but nothing helped. They were frustrated and worried because shows like this mattered to them. They wanted every performance to count. Michael noticed the issue and stepped in. His band had a working PA system, and he offered to let Mammoth use it. It was a friendly gesture, not planned or strategic. He just wanted the night to go smoothly for everyone. That moment stuck with Eddie and Alex. They appreciated that Michael helped them without hesitation. It showed them something about his character. After the show, the brothers talked to Michael more and kept the connection alive. At the time, None of them knew that this small act was the first step toward a major change in their lives. They were simply young musicians trying to help each other. A short time later, Mammoth's bassist left the band. Eddie and Alex needed someone new, someone reliable. They remembered Michael, both for his musical reputation and for the way he handled himself at that high school event. They invited him to audition. Michael agreed, even though he did not know what to expect. When he walked into the audition, he brought not just his bass, but also the steady attitude that had already impressed them. The audition turned into an instant match. When they played together, the mix of Michael's solid bass lines, Alex's powerful drumming, and Eddie's unique guitar style created a strong and complete sound. Michael's voice added a high harmony that lifted their music even further. By the end of the session, it was clear to everyone that this lineup worked. He joined the band officially, and soon after, the group changed its name to Van Halen. That single night, a show that was supposed to be just another local gig became a turning point in rock history. A broken PA system and a simple offer from Michael linked their futures in a way none of them expected. What started as a helpful gesture led to one of the most successful rock lineups of all time. Stick around, because the rise that followed this moment shows just how fast everything changed once the band locked into place. Hidden band secrets. Van Halen exploded onto the scene, and their rise was fast and loud. Their 1978 debut album changed everything for the band. Songs like Eruption and Running with the Devil showed Eddie Van Halen's skill and pushed the group into the spotlight. The band went from playing small clubs to selling out large venues. Fame changed how they worked and how they lived. It also changed how they treated each other. On stage, the band looked tight and exciting. Eddie's guitar drew most of the attention. Fans and the media focused on his playing. But the music needed more than just guitar. Michael Anthony's bass and backing vocals were part of that sound. His voice and his timing helped shape the songs. For many fans, the band seemed like a unit. Behind the scenes, things were more complicated. Touring became constant. The schedule was heavy. They played night after night and moved from city to city. The tour bus and constant travel left little time for rest. When people are tired, small problems grow into bigger ones. In public, they were a powerful band. In private, pressure and stress created friction. Decision-making began to shift to the Van Halen brothers. Eddie and Alex started taking control of many choices. They decided on songs, set lists, and business moves without always including the other members. This narrowed the space for discussion and for shared input. When a few people hold power, the balance in a band changes. Those who had once been equals began to feel less involved. David Lee Roth's presence also added strain. He was a large personality and wanted the spotlight. His style and demands sometimes clashed with what others wanted. Arguments and tension followed. The group struggled to find a way to keep everyone satisfied. Michael often stepped in to calm tensions. He tried to keep the band focused on music and on the show. He wanted the group to stay together long enough to keep playing. Money and contracts added another layer of stress. As the band grew richer, the stakes rose. People became more aware of who did what and who got paid for which parts. Discussions about credits, royalties, and contracts moved from small talk to major issues. Those talks usually happened in front of lawyers and managers. When members felt excluded from those discussions, trust started to break down. The 1984 period summed up this change. The band had huge success with the album 1984. They had big shows and big crowds. But decisions about business and creative control had been narrowing for some time. Those changes affected how the members felt toward each other. Michael kept playing and kept trying to hold things together, even as he saw the group shift away from the simple teamwork of their early days. Fame had given them everything from money to fans and stage time. It also made private life harder and made working with each other more difficult. The public saw a successful band. The private reality involved harder choices, less shared control, and growing distance between members. Michael stayed loyal and kept working, but the cracks behind the curtain were real and growing. Stay with me next, and we'll look closely at the moment that changed Michael's life and the band forever. Signed away millions. In 1984, Van Halen was at the top of their game. Their album 1984 was everywhere. with hits like Jump, Panama, and Hot for Teacher. The band was selling out stadiums, and the money, fame, and attention were enormous. But behind the scenes, everything was not as perfect as it appeared. Michael Anthony, who had been a loyal and steady part of the band from the very beginning, was about to face one of the most difficult moments of his career. One night during the tour before a show, Michael was called backstage. He didn't know why at first. Waiting for him were Eddie and Alex Van Halen, David Lee Roth, and their manager Noel Monk. They handed him a stack of papers and told him it was a new contract. There was no lawyer present. There was no real discussion. Michael later said he didn't even know what the meeting was about until he was standing there. He was told to sign, and that if he didn't, the tour would not continue. The new contract was devastating for Michael. It stripped him of his songwriting credits. He would no longer be recognized as part of the creative team for songs he had helped write. His royalties were cut dramatically, even for songs that had already been released. All the contributions he had made to the band's unique sound, the bass lines, the harmonies, and the parts that helped Eddie's guitar shine were suddenly unrecognized in the contract. For Michael, it was a huge shock. He had spent years building the band with them, sharing in the work and the music. Now, he was being excluded from what he had helped create. He had very little time to respond. The ultimatum was clear: sign or the tour stops. There was no room for negotiation. Michael felt trapped. He cared deeply about the fans and the people waiting outside for the show. He did not want to cancel the concert or disappoint anyone. In that moment, he made the difficult choice to sign the contract. It was a decision made out of loyalty to the music and the fans, but it changed his relationship with the band forever. Noel Monk, the manager, later wrote that what happened to Michael was one of the most ruthless moves he had ever seen in the rock world. Despite the shock and the betrayal, Michael did not argue. He did not storm out. He went on stage and played one of the best performances of his life. But inside, he felt something shift. The trust and brotherhood he thought he had with the band were gone. The laughter, the camaraderie, and the sense of family had started to disappear. From that point on, things between Michael and the Van Halen brothers were different. He continued to perform and contribute to the band, but his role had quietly changed. He became the quiet casualty of the band's success, carrying a hidden burden that he would keep private for years. Next, we'll see how Michael navigated life with Sammy Hagar in the band while facing new challenges and changes behind the scenes. Quietly pushed out. After David Lee Roth left Van Halen in 1985, Sammy Hagar joined as the new lead singer. At first, it seemed like a fresh start. Hagar brought a different energy and a new voice to the band. Fans were excited, and the band had another chance to grow. Michael Anthony, who had stayed loyal through all the previous challenges, hoped that things might return to a sense of balance. For a short time, there was optimism that the band could function more smoothly and that friendships might heal. The new lineup worked well musically. The 1986 album 5150 was a success, filled with songs that showed a softer and more melodic side of Van Halen. Michael's harmonies remained essential, and his bass helped hold the music together. On stage, Michael and Hagar had strong chemistry. Their performances were lively, and fans appreciated the energy and tight sound they created. For Michael, there was still pride in playing and contributing to music that people loved. Despite this positive front, cracks continued to grow. Eddie and Alex Van Halen still held control over almost all decisions. From choosing the songs to setting schedules, the brothers made the calls without including Michael or Hagar. While Sammy sometimes pushed back and expressed disagreement, Michael remained quiet. He had already seen many fights and knew that confrontation often led to longer tension. Instead, he focused on performing and supporting the band quietly. During recording sessions, Michael sometimes felt sidelined. Eddie would tell him, "Don't worry about the bass, I'll handle it." This was difficult for Michael. For years, he had been the foundation of the band. Now, he was being excluded from parts of the music he had always helped create. On some albums, Eddie recorded bass himself. Michael stayed in the studio and played where he was asked, keeping the peace even when he felt hurt. The joy of music began to mix with frustration and sadness. The 1990s brought more challenges. Eddie's drinking became worse, and studio sessions dragged on endlessly. Waiting for others to show up or for the recording to begin was exhausting. The camaraderie that once existed between the members faded. Michael stopped seeing Eddie socially after the shows. There were no jam sessions, no bar nights, and no conversations outside of work. The friendship that had begun with trust and laughter slowly disappeared. Even as the band achieved great success during this period, Michael's role and his emotional connection were shrinking. He became a quiet observer of a group he had helped build. His loyalty remained, but the joy and connection of the early years were gone. He played, he performed, and he kept the music alive, but the bond with Eddie and the brothers was fading. Next, we'll look at the period when Michael was finally replaced and excluded, showing just how deep the personal and professional rupture had become. Replaced by blood. By the early 2000s, Van Halen had undergone several changes. Sammy Hagar had left, reunions with David Lee Roth had collapsed, and the band was largely quiet. Michael Anthony, who had spent decades contributing to the band's sound and stability, found himself completely on the outside. He wasn't officially fired. There were no phone calls, no explanations, and no goodbyes. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. He waited, hoping for contact, but none came. The silence was profound. It wasn't just about the band or the music anymore. It was about friendship, trust, and the sense of family that had been quietly taken away. In 2004, there was a brief moment of hope. Sammy Hagar reached out telling Michael that a reunion tour was being planned. Michael felt overjoyed. For a moment, it seemed like a chance to return, to reconnect with the band and perhaps restore some of the lost bonds. But the reality was harsh. When Michael received the tour contract, he discovered his role had been greatly reduced. His pay was cut, and he was no longer considered a partner. He was being treated as a hired musician rather than the co-founder he had always been. Still, he agreed to join. He wanted the fans to experience the full Van Halen sound. He wanted to do what was right for the music, even if it meant personal pain. The tour itself was difficult. Eddie Van Halen's behavior was inconsistent, influenced by a return to heavy drinking. Some shows were brilliant, others chaotic. Michael felt like he was playing next to a ghost of the friend he had once known. Conversations and connections with Eddie were rare. The bond that had begun decades earlier, the one that had carried them through early tours and recordings, felt irretrievably broken. Then, in 2006, Michael learned from the press, not from Eddie, that Van Halen was reforming again. This time, David Lee Roth was back, and Michael would not be included. His replacement was Wolfgang Van Halen, Eddie's teenage son. The news was painful on a professional level, but also deeply personal. Michael had devoted so many years to the band, and now he felt erased from a story he had helped write. He never blamed Wolfgang and always spoke kindly about him. But being replaced by his former bandmate's child made the separation final and absolute. Eddie's death in 2020 brought the emotions to the surface. Michael discovered the news through the media like everyone else. There had been no call, no conversation, and no final goodbye. In interviews, Michael broke down while recounting the early days, the long tours, and the friendship they once shared. He cried for the loss of Eddie, but also for the years of silence and the missing connection. He reflected on the fact that, despite everything, there had been a time when they were brothers. That bond could not be erased, even if it had been neglected for decades. Next, we'll see how Michael found a quiet form of closure through Wolfgang and through the music that had always connected him to Eddie. Peace through music. After Eddie Van Halen's death in 2020, Michael Anthony felt a mix of grief and reflection. Their friendship had been fractured for many years, and the silence between them had been absolute. Michael had not spoken to Eddie in years, and there had been no final conversation. The loss was not just of a bandmate, but of someone who had once been like a brother. It reopened feelings from decades ago, the pain of exclusion, the broken trust, and the absence of closure. Despite this, Michael carried no bitterness toward Eddie or anyone else in the band. He spoke about the past calmly, honestly, and with respect. Months after Eddie passed, Wolfgang Van Halen, Eddie's son and Michael's replacement in the band, reached out to him. Wolfgang had heard how Michael had always spoken about his father with care and respect, even after being left out. The call was private and heartfelt. They shared memories of Eddie, talked about the music, and reflected on the early days of Van Halen. Michael described the conversation as meaningful and healing. For the first time in many years, he felt a connection that helped close the chapter on a painful period of his life. Wolfgang's call was not about public attention or drama. It was about genuine understanding, respect, and the continuation of Eddie's legacy through someone who cared. Michael also found peace through the music itself. Even after leaving Van Halen, he continued performing in bands like Chickenfoot and The Circle with Sammy Hagar. Playing old Van Halen songs brought him closer to the history he had been a part of. Every note, every chord, reminded him of the years he had spent with Eddie and the other members. For Michael, music became a way to reconnect, to remember, and to honor the bond they had shared. It was a private, personal conversation that required no words. The music allowed him to feel Eddie's presence, to relive the joy of creating and performing, and to finally accept what had happened without anger. Over time, Michael's view of the past shifted. He realized that forgiveness and peace did not require apologies or public statements. They came through understanding and acceptance. He recognized that some friendships are not meant to last forever, but their echoes remain. Michael spoke about the early years with Eddie, the laughter, the long nights of practice, the first tours, and the excitement of playing music together. Those were the moments he chose to hold on to, rather than the fights, the broken contracts, or the painful endings. Through these memories, through the music, and through his connection with Wolfgang, Michael found a sense of closure he had not expected. At 70, Michael reflects on his life with gratitude. He acknowledges the heartbreak and the betrayals, but chooses to focus on the good moments and the music that outlived all conflicts. He continues to perform, and in every show he feels a quiet connection to Eddie. The music they built together still lives and reaches fans, carrying the story forward in a way words never could. It reminds him that while some relationships end, the impact they leave can endure forever. Michael Anthony's story shows the highs and lows of life in one of rock's greatest bands. Through loyalty, heartbreak, and years of silence, he kept playing, kept creating, and never let bitterness take over. His journey is a reminder that even when friendships break and doors close, the music and the memories can carry on. Betrayed bassist. Michael Anthony was the quiet backbone of Van Halen. He kept his feelings private for most of his life. He rarely went to the press with complaints. He wanted the music to come first, and the band to keep working. That choice shaped his career and his life. From early on, he chose stability over the spotlight. He picked the bass and built his voice around timing and harmony. On stage, he provided a steady foundation. His harmonies became a key part of the band's sound. Off-stage, he aimed to calm arguments and prevent fights. He wanted the group to stay together so they could keep making music. Quiet loyalty helped the band in many ways. When tensions rose, he stepped in, not to lead, but to soften conflicts. He did not push to be the center. He did not chase headlines. His style was to handle problems privately. For fans, he was the reliable figure on the left side of the stage. For his bandmates, he was the person who stayed steady when others were changing. There was a cost to staying silent. Some decisions that affected him happened without real discussion. One of the biggest was a contract he signed in 1984. He was handed papers backstage and told to sign. The new deal removed songwriting credits and cut royalties. There was no time, no lawyer, and no real choice. He signed because he did not want to cancel the show and disappoint fans. That moment changed how he felt about his place in the band. He was still playing, but he no longer felt fully part of the team. Over the years, he watched his role shift. On some recordings, other members recorded parts he once played. He was left out of money talks and creative choices. Still, he chose not to go public with anger. He said his silence was about keeping the music alive for listeners. He did not want personal fights to break the band's connection with fans. The quiet life also brought loss of daily friendship. In the early days, they shared small moments that built trust. They ate together, joked, and played late into the night. As fame grew, those moments faded. He missed the ease of those years. He felt lonelier even while standing before crowds. That loneliness stayed private. He learned to accept change without public drama. After the Van Halen chapter, he kept working in music. He joined other projects and kept performing songs fans loved. When Eddie Van Halen died, Michael's composure broke on camera. He cried while remembering their early days and the bond they once had. That reaction showed how much pain he had carried without showing it. Michael's silence was a choice with a price. He protected the music. He protected himself from fights. He lived with the hidden burden of being loyal when loyalty was not always returned. He kept going. Still, he kept playing and kept the music alive for millions of fans. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes rock stories you won't hear anywhere else.